You seem to be comfortable with the concept of decolonization when it's undertaken in the context of Africa, when it's undertaken in the context of Latin America, and you seem to be appalled at all the mass graves which are unearthed under schools, where, let's say, indigenous peoples and their children were murdered, and they were found under, to show a similar example as far as Bharat is concerned, both in the past and the present. Somehow I become the fascist. Seems to be purveying some kind of a politically incorrect truth. And so I decided to perform the exercise of first explaining. If you wish to understand colonization as a project, it makes very little sense to understand it purely from the perspective of Bharat. Look at it globally and then ask yourself, why would the European colonizers' attitude or behavior be any different as far as Bharat is concerned? If the consequence of his colonization is that it leaves Latin America Christianized, it leaves Canada Christianized, it leaves Australia Christianized, it leaves New Zealand Christianized, and somehow the moment he comes to Bharat, he apparently developed a secular conscience, and that we were the exception to his rule, without realizing that if we are around, and if this culture is still around, the credit cannot go to the benevolent nature of the colonizer, but must go to the inherent spiritual strength of this particular country and its civilization. And therefore, I wanted to confront it. And from there comes the second tangent. I wouldn't say a tangent, perhaps a sequitur or the corollary to that particular position, that if this happens to be one of those few societies which has managed to survive the ravages of a clear evangelical colonization experience, how do we still continue to wallow under the notion that this is a defeated society? And that is something that I wanted to push in terms of a very clear position. 3, a society such as ours will undergo 3 levels of analysis according to me. First is the awareness or the consciousness of the layers of coloniality that you're buried under. Second is a clear understanding of the extent of coloniality, which may vary from subject to subject. And 3 would be a prescription in terms of what is the way forward. So awareness, diagnosis, followed by prognosis or prescription. If I were to be engaging with a society which is already aware, I could have proceeded to steps 2 and 3 directly. But when I try and make lots of population in this country which continue to believe that we have not suffered any such thing, or there are no unconscious or subconscious impacts of colonization whatsoever, I'm still at step 1, where I'm trying to convince and having to convince people that such an impact continues to exist. So if the consensus on step 1 has not been arrived at yet, where is the question of me moving to step 2 and step 3? Because then I'd be jumping the gun. So the idea was to lay out the problem identification, so to speak, from an perspective. That this is the nature of the problem, this is the quality of the problem, and this is the effect of the problem in multiple areas. At the very least, I've identified a few high-level verticals, such as caste, religion, identity, nature, so on and so forth, and environment, of course. And then said this is the impact of colonization. It is across the world. It just so happens that because of your resistance or your reactions, there is a change in the manner in which it has affected you. But the intention of the colonizer has been uniform and at the very least largely the same and broadly the same across the world.